What about all of the pictures of the Earth?
They are all clearly computer-generated images. They claim this picture from Apollo 17 in 1972 is real, and they also claim that the 2015 Epic Earth picture is real. But NASA employee Robert Simon gave us a glimpse of how they do it when he shared his experience of creating the Blue Marble 2.0 in 2002.
Okay, so this is going to be the guy that they bring up every single time where he says it's Photoshop because it has to be. Very true. Again, 1972, I think I went over this in my video I did with Dan about the capabilities of computer-generated imagery in 1972, or about that time. If you look at, I think it was called, I'll actually give you the title because I didn't in that video, I do apologise. It was a CG cartoon with an actual narrative, completely made on computers, and it was bloody awful by today's standards. If they honestly think that the absolute top end of computer-generated imagery could create the Blue Marble in 1972, then their grasp on reality is even more tenuous than I originally thought. And as for the other pictures having to be photoshopped, it's because they're composite images. We aren't standing back far enough. I've said this before I think in my last little video I did in my kitchen with the awful audio. Again, I apologise about that. If you watch that entire video and not the cherry-picked elements they pick out, you'll see that the original purpose of the footage or gathering the images was to look at large areas of phytoplankton, I believe. I may have got that completely wrong, for which I do apologise. But over a certain amount of time, because this took a few years, they had gathered enough images to create an entire 3D map of the planet. And they were very high resolution images, which is why they were perfect for the job.
He is now called Mr. Blue Marble. He was interviewed and on record stating, "The last time anyone took a photograph from above low Earth orbit that showed an entire hemisphere, one side of the globe, was in 1972 during Apollo 17. NASA's Earth Observing System, EOS, satellites were designed to give a checkup of Earth's health. By 2002, we finally had enough data to make a snapshot of the entire Earth, so we did."
Primarily taking data and making pictures out of it?
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
But it's actually rather telling that he says it's a Photoshop. If they were trying to hide some big secret that they're making all up as they go along, do you honestly think that video would have got out? I believe NASA released it. NASA gave him permission to do the interview and to say the things he said. If they wanted to hide all this, you wouldn't even know this video existed. It's amazing that an organisation that's supposed to be at the absolute pinnacle of subterfuge and collusion and all these espionage type things make massive cock-ups like this by allowing some guy in an amazing check shirt to say things like he said, release them to the public so idiots can pick it apart and think they've made a point.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
So again, there's this amazingly secretive and evil organisation that's taking all your money, all this other garbage they always come up with, and this video exists because they're trying to hide the shape of the Earth. Gotcha.
Why are all the other planets round then?
When you compare amateur footage done with professional grade cameras and compare it to NASA's official images of planets and stars, it's clear that NASA images are all computer generated, no different than the photos of Earth.
So every single close-up photo of every single planet is absolutely CGI and has been since time began. If you go on to a website photojournal.jpl.nasa.gov, you can see all these photos that he's cherry-picked. So you can see all the information about every single image, including which camera was used to take it. Of course, one of the most famous cameras that is taking pictures of other planets on a regular basis is Hubble, which is still taking pictures to this day, and they can be found and verified on NASA's website. But of course, NASA's evil.
What have become known as planets are round lights that seem to be set over the flat Earth.
It's rather revealing that he says they seem to be. If you don't know what they are, and thousands of other people have already told you what they are, then there's a very good chance that you're in the minority and you're led by ignorance.
The so-called planets and stars are not what we have been told they are, and comparing luminous objects that you see in the sky to the Earth under your feet is very ineffective for actually proving the supposed rotundity of the Earth.
The light is a sphere, so the floor must be a sphere. What?
Since there are no actual photographs of the Earth and motion has never been experienced or proven, it would seem more logical for one to assume that we are on a flat motionless plane and everything we see in the heavens revolves around us.
There's that amazingly huge ego again. Here's a newsflash for you. You're not important. I'm not important. In the grand scheme of the universe, we are tiny specks, we are atoms on a vast arse of nothingness. And I think this is rather revealing because there's one thing about flat earthers and space deniers and like that. They are the most important and most intelligent people on the planet because they alone have figured all this rubbish out. And they alone are the beholders of the ultimate truth. But when it comes down to it, when they say statements like this, that we can't experience motion, and it makes more sense that the stars are just lights in the sky that are held on a firmament of some description, they're just embarrassing themselves. And it's been going on for so long now, I honestly think they're beginning to enjoy it.
What about satellites and GPS?
As crazy as it may sound, satellites are a hoax. Have you ever wondered why there are never any damaged or fallen satellites?
Because they burn up in the atmosphere if they do. I think there's one or two instances, I had a quick Google, where some have fallen to Earth or parts of spaceships have fallen to Earth. But anything like a satellite, sidebar, how big do you think a satellite is? Some of them are literally no bigger than that. And if something like that tries to get through the atmosphere, it's not going to last long. You've seen how much heat is generated, why the bottom of the space shuttle had to have so many thermal tiles underneath to protect it from the friction that is caused by coming back into the Earth's atmosphere. A relatively tiny thing, the size of a couple of microwaves duct taped together, isn't going to last long against the friction generated when it tries to come back to Earth. By the way, that picture you've used, do you honestly think the satellites are that visible?
And why there are no satellite malfunctions due to constant heating and cooling? It's weird they don't melt in the thermosphere that's over 2,000 degrees.
Yeah, because the people who make them are smarter than you, and they take these things into account when they build them. That's what thermal shielding is. Remember those pictures that are put about by people like He Who Shall Not Be Named and D Marvel, where they show you the picture of the lunar lander and the thermal blankets? That's basically what's coating the outside of most satellites, reflective surfaces, mylar, things like that. Like I said, they take these things into account when they're building a thing. They know what it's like up there. You don't.
I find myself looking at the moon and wondering why we never see satellites pass by the moon.
Again, do you not know how big a satellite is? I refer you to images taken by Dave McKeegan or even Jeranism, who kind of shot himself in the foot by photographing the International Space Station passing by the moon. The International Space Station is bloody huge in relation to the size of your average satellite. If you cast your mind back to the video we've been arguing about for the last month or so, where you've got the astronaut standing up inside his little sleep module there. Now if you think of how big that area would be in relation to the entire size, and take into account that a satellite, your average satellite, without its wings, what have you, would fit inside that hab, of course you're not going to see it from the ground. And it's damn egotistical of you to think that you could.
So there are thousands of miles of fiber optic cables under the seabed that supplies 90% of the Earth's communication, internet, phones, etc. And GPS works off of cell phone towers. It's called triangulation.
No, it doesn't. GPS global positioning satellites. You're getting confused with programs like 24. It's like, oh, let's triangulate somebody's position using the local cell phone towers. Yeah, that's probably right, but that's not the same technology as global positioning satellites. Hence the name.
Haven't you seen those really tall towers and wondered what they are? Satellite TV is just enhanced radio using ground-based towers.
No, it isn't, and I know this exactly why, and I can tell you how I know. It's because I've had to reposition the satellite dish for my Sky TV just outside the back door, and we had an engineer come out because it went on the fritz a little while ago, and he had to realign the satellite because where we are, we get affected by high winds, and for whatever reason, one of the bolts hadn't been fastened or something, and the satellite dish got out of whack. Now, there's a little thing that a lot of people don't know. In the summer, 11 o'clock in the morning, if you point your satellite dish towards the sun, that's pretty much where the Sky satellite is. I thought it was an urban myth, but it was actually confirmed to me by the Sky engineer. So yeah, if you ever get out of whack and you're in the UK and your Sky satellite dish needs realigning, 11 o'clock in the morning, pointed towards the sun, you'll probably be 5 degrees out. And I hate to tell you this, we have got really crap mobile phone signal in this town. If I'm expecting a text, I literally have to hug my phone up against this window or I'm not going to get it. I'm not joking. There are no cell phone towers in this village, and yet somehow we still get satellite TV.
Today, there are said to be thousands, but the odd thing is that trying to prove it only leaves you fruitless.
What? Fruitless? A search can be fruitless, you can be fruitless in your endeavours, but you and yourself can't be fruitless. It's just a very strange way of saying that. You're showing a picture of all of the satellites, or most of the satellites, on some kind of tracking website. And yet, in the same breath, you're saying you can't find them? I'm confused.
Is outer space even real?
Yes and no. What you see in the sky, as far as stars and wandering stars, also known as planets, are there. How could we deny them? We don't know what they actually are, but they are there. Now, what we are told about outer space and what it is not true at all. Everything we believe about so-called outer space is due mostly to Hollywood movies and other media, including children's cartoons.
Just a minute. A few moments ago you were saying that these stars were just pinpricks on the firmament that were just held in place by magic, and now you're saying that outer space is real, but you don't know what they are, even though everyone else does. Consistency isn't your strong point, is it?
Of course, NASA propaganda is the biggest culprit. As we have already gone over, there are no pictures of Earth, and even images of all the other so-called planets are computer generated. NASA has gone on record numerous times stating that humans can't get past low Earth orbit.
NASA's next spacecraft, already being built and tested across America, will do those things and more.
This is the spacecraft that's going to take humans to explore the solar system. It's the next big step for NASA in exploration.
Called the Orion Multipurpose Craft.
Who was that?
This next-generation spacecraft will enable America to explore beyond low Earth orbit.
To get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
And that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
Low Earth orbit is supposedly between 99 and 1,200 miles away. The funny thing is that they say the moon is over 200,000 miles away. How did we make it so far in the 1960s and 70s if we can't do it today?
Not entirely sure where he's going on with this little subset, but that looks like a clip from someone else's video he's thrown in. But the thing about low Earth orbit and we being unable to leave low Earth orbit at the moment is absolutely correct, because, as has been said many times before, we don't have the technology anymore. Now, the only parts that came back were the CSM or Command and Service Module. These are the parts that the astronauts used to come back to Earth. The rest of the technology is either still on the surface of the moon or is floating about in space. I think there's actually one that is actually still floating around in space somewhere, but it's in a really large orbit. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. But yeah, since then and now, we couldn't replicate the original technology because it would be so outdated. And at the time, they really were flying by the seat of their pants. That's how they had to make stuff up as they went along when Apollo 13 went tits up. But getting out of low Earth orbit, for anybody who's played Kerbal Space Program will know, takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy. It is entirely possible to get out of low Earth orbit. We know the numbers behind it. We know the numbers that are needed to do it because we've done it before, but at the moment it's not physically possible, partly because NASA doesn't have the budget. Back in the 60s, when Kennedy said that NASA could have as much as they wanted, I think they got something along the lines of 5% of the entire annual US government budget to fund the space program. These days it's less than half of 1% of the US budget. That's why we haven't gone back. They can't afford it. The knowledge is there, the technology can be created, they just got to find somebody who's willing to pay for it.
The International Space Station, just like everything else brought to us by NASA, is a fake Freemasonic hoax, completely fabricated and done with special effects, models, pools, zero-G planes, and various other camera tricks.
I think I've gone over this before. Move on.
How is circumnavigation possible on a flat Earth?
Very easily. You can travel east and west directions to ultimately end up right back where you started. The face of the Earth looks similar to that of a clock. In fact, clocks were most likely designed after the true appearance of our world.
No, they weren't. Clocks were designed to look nice. Nothing to do with the supposed shape of the Earth.
If you follow a compass east for long enough, you'll make a full circuit. Same thing if you travel west long enough. As we've already gone over, the flat Earth map that was around before globes were easily converts to a globe.
To say that flat Earth maps were around before globes were is completely incorrect. We knew that the Earth was a globe before the first maps were written, I believe. Eratosthenes, I'm sorry if I completely butchered that name, but he's the guy who figured out the average size of the Earth using a couple of sticks. Or was it a stick and a hole in the ground? Something along those lines.
So everything you believe you are doing on a globe is actually taking place on a flat Earth.
Well, that's a bit of an all-encompassing statement of garbage, isn't it? Everything you think you're doing on a globe, you're actually doing on a flat Earth. So standing at South America, Australia and South Africa, looking south and seeing the Southern Cross, that's happening on a flat Earth, is it? Jolly good.
How come the moon is upside down in the southern hemisphere?
This is another very simple explanation. When somebody is in the northern part of the Earth, or on the northern part of the Earth, they see the moon from this angle. When somebody is on the southern part of the Earth, the moon looks like this. They're looking at it from this angle. They see it from the opposite angle, and that's all it is. Imagine you tape a picture of the moon in the center of your living room, right? Depending on where you are in the room, the moon will be seen differently. When pondering this question, keep in mind that the face of the moon never changes. On a spherical Earth, we'd expect to see other sides, but we never have.
So I have been to Australia. I was there for about a month in 2002 on my honeymoon. And I did observe the moon several times from the southern hemisphere, and indeed in relation to us, it would be upside down. But, and again, their moon is small and local. So essentially what he's saying here is correct if You're talking about two people standing in the exact bottoms of those arrows looking at the moon in that position. So let's say if somebody in Florida was observing the moon whilst this is still going on, what's in this image, then he would see the side of the moon, because what we're talking about is one flat edge that's constantly pointing towards the Earth because it's tidally locked. So you've got northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, equator, more or less, but if you've got somebody in Florida, from this point of view, they would see the side elevation, so to speak, and even more as it went away or came towards them. But they don't, because the moon is several 100,000 miles away and it's tidally locked to us.